to the Theory Studio podcast. I'm thrilled to welcome Jason Goldberg. Jason Goldberg is a mindset mentor, and he's written a international bestseller called Prison Break, which I loved, by the way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, just to say, I absolutely love your work. I've watched a lot of your talks, and I probably hide it like 60 to 75% of your book. There's like notes all over it, and it's amazing. It's really a great tool. So thanks for writing that.
Yeah, thank you.
So as we mentioned earlier, I know that you were recently in Dubai for the Mind Valley conference.
Yep.
I think it was an A-Fest event, right?
Yeah, Mind Valley is like the educational platform, and then they have different live events. So A-Fest is, we only do that once a year. That's in May. So it's coming up in this May in Colombia. And then this one was, they called it Mind Valley Live in Dubai.
Nice, nice. It's funny because when I was online, I kept seeing you tagged in like very specific quotes that spoke to me.
Really?
Yes. So one of them is you don't need permission to do what you want to do and who you want to be. Stop
Yes.
negotiating with your soul.
Yeah. 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 It's a big one. It's a
Yeah,
big
so
one.
that really spoke to me because I know in my own life as well as in the lives of, friends and the people around me, it's always this like tug of war between like doing the thing that you know that you want to be doing and then talking yourself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. It's a big thing. And it's, I was talking about this to one of my group coaching programs yesterday, and I was coaching somebody in on that call. And there's this interesting thing where a lot of times when we feel stuck, it's because we're unwilling to feel a certain feeling, a certain experience. And what I mean by that is I had a woman I was coaching one time, and she came on the call and she said she just doesn't know what she wants. And she's like, people keep asking her, well, what do you want? She goes, I don't know what I want. They're like, no, but like, what do you want? She's like, I'm going to kill, what I want is to kill you because you keep asking me and I don't know what I want. And so, she said, yeah, I've gone through the, what brings me joy, or, what would I do if money wasn't a thing? And nothing comes up for me. And so we're talking. And then at some point it occurred to me to ask the question, what is the feeling you are unwilling to feel? What is the feeling you are unwilling to experience? And she thought about it for a minute and she said, failure. I'm unwilling to
Yeah.
experience failure. And I said, cool. So just for a moment, if we suspend that fear, what if you weren't unwilling? We won't say what if you were willing, but what if you were not unwilling to experience failure? What do you think would be possible? And she goes, oh, well, then I would just start the farm that I've always wanted to do with the regenerative farming and change the food system. And I'm like, what? I thought you didn't know what you wanted, and now you're like crystal clear. And that's where it really clicked for me, that the extent to which we are unwilling to feel something is the extent to which we're going to be stuck.
That makes sense. Yeah, that speaks to me. I think a lot of it has to do with the narrative that we place on things and what we tell ourselves about what it means if we do fail. Like that has some sort of indication on our value. It's like we place on value on the things that we achieve, how much money we make, what people think about us. So, yeah, that was an interesting question that you asked. I like that.
Yeah. What is it for you? So if you weren't negotiating with your soul, what might you be doing differently right now, or more of, or less of, or anything else?
I think for me, yeah, probably it's probably failure. It's probably the feel of failure, putting myself out there and then people not being responsive to it in the way that I would like them to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can try mainstream brainwashing. Typically works really well, and that way, whatever you put out, people will just like, oh, must follow Brandy.
I know.
So that's one option. Also, like spraying some kind of Xanax mister
Yeah.
over society can sometimes
I
work as
know,
well.
right?
But for the rest of us, just know that people who are afraid of putting themselves out there because of worry about being judged, which of course I've had that as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting because people are going to judge you. They always judge you. That's just what we do. We're judgment machines, for better or for worse. I mean, in a good way, we're judgment machines, and that's what allows me to not step in front of a car in traffic, right? I can
Right.
judge the distance between me and that car, and I know not to step off the curb. And then maybe on the worst side, judgment becomes like you said, some kind of a value assessment of who I am as a person. So it's the same thing with like abandonment. I was coaching one of my clients the other day. She's an actress and doing incredible work. And she has this deep feeling of fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, this may not be easy to hear, but everything in your life is going to abandon you. Your body, your mind, your friends, your family, everything is, but that's not a bad thing. right?
Yeah.
Because what I always say is from ice cream cones to broken bones, everything is temporary,
Yeah.
right? So you better enjoy the crap out of that ice cream cone because it's going to disappear. And you better not put too much stake into the pain of the broken bone because it's going to heal. And so if we can just be in this place of recognizing that everything is temporary, everything by nature is meant to eventually leave us, then we can be really grateful for the fact that it hasn't left us yet.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, the abandonment thing speaks to me. I know it does for a lot of people. I know that it's a huge fear, and I know that a lot of it surrounds what happened in childhood. I think we walk around with wounds that we have that we don't know that we have, and we don't know where they came from. And so it's interesting once you get to this place in your life, usually as an adult, not always, but usually as an adult, where you start to try to become a little bit more aware of why it is that you're reacting the way that you do in certain situations. And what advice do you have for someone that's on this journey and they're just starting to figure out, hey, some of this is actually coming from when I was a kid? What do I
Yeah.
do with that information?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you want to uncover what those things are, just get into a romantic relationship. And I promise
Yeah.
everything that you have from childhood will come up because we're always trying to get our unmet childhood needs met through our partners, for better or for worse. And if you can have an awareness of that, then it's a great place to have conversation and to have more empathy and more compassion and support your partner and all these things. But I think the first thing here, when you start recognizing this stuff, and this was something that, well, everything I talk about is from my direct experience, but when I had my kind of, I don't like to call it a wake up call because I had, so part of my story is that I was raised by a single mother, single Jewish mother. She can hear everything we're saying in Florida right now, so she's probably on the payroll with you, Brandy. But so it was just the two of us, right? And Dad left my mom when she was pregnant. Like as soon as she got pregnant, he was like, "Have an abortion or I'm leaving," and she said, "There's no way I'm having an abortion." He left, never turned back. I never met him, never saw him, never talked to him, nothing. So I was brought into the world with the message of, "Hey, one of the people who created you doesn't want you."
Yeah.
Kind of hard to start from that place. Now, I didn't have that language as a kid, but like eventually that started showing itself. And so that manifested into me trying to cope with my emotions instead of feeling my emotions because we weren't taught how to feel our emotions. And for me, the coping came through food, right? So if I was sad, I would eat. If I was happy, I would eat. If we were celebrating, I would eat. If I was bored, I would eat. If I was stressed, I would eat. Food was the coping mechanism. And so I went from being kind of the chunky kid in first grade to 250 pounds when I was 15 to 330 pounds when I was in my late 20s. And so when I had this moment, and it's in the first chapter of Prison Break, when I had this kind of moment that the reason I don't like to say it's a wake up call is because it wasn't like that was the moment where I go, oh my God, I'm 330 pounds. I'm so unhealthy. Something should change. Like I knew something was off. I knew that what I was doing wasn't good, but there was never a catalyst to really change. And there was never a catalyst to take personal responsibility. And so I had this moment in 2009, 330 pounds, director of engineering for this technology firm when I was still in IT consulting. And I had this moment where I tried to make a purchase on Amazon with my credit card, fairly small purchase. I knew I had enough money in the bank. It was my bank card, and it kept getting declined. And so I call the bank and I'm super like angry. I had so much anger back then. I was anxious, I was stressed, I was angry, I had suicidal ideation, like all these things. Even though everything looked good on the outside, I was still struggling a lot on the inside. So I call the bank and I demand to know why my card's being declined. And they essentially tell me that there were some potentially fraudulent charges on the account. And so they deactivated the card to protect my money, right? To which most people would say, thank you so much. Like, what do I need to do now? And thanks for looking out for me. And I just doubled down on my anger. I was such a dick. And I was just like, what do you mean? Did somebody hack my account? Did somebody steal my identity? Like, I demand to know what these charges are. And I'm expecting, people staying at the Waldorf and buying, Ferraris and stuff. And the charges were that there were 4 fast food transactions in one day in Orlando, where I lived at the time. And their system flagged that as being potentially fraudulent activity. And so they cut off the card. And so that was the moment for me where I couldn't find somebody else to blame. Like normally I would blame genetics. I would blame the fact that I was in Florida and it's too hot to go out and be active. And I would blame my employees who were just, too demanding, or my clients who were just total morons and making my life miserable. It was always out there. I was always trying to find someone to blame. And in that moment, I couldn't find that anymore. And so the reason I'm telling you that story is because that initial understanding, that initial realization of, oh, it's me, like I'm the one who's making this happen. This was not a liberating thought. This was not a liberating experience of like, oh my gosh, it's me. Well, then I'm just going to take full control of my life and everything will be fantastic.
Yeah.
It was a full shame moment, Brandy. I felt so shameful. Like, seriously, this has been me the entire time. What an idiot. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I'm supposed to be such a smart guy? Why can't I figure this out? I'm such a moron. I started beating myself up. So the first thing I would say when you're on this path is really try to be graceful with yourself, right? Do not beat yourself up. If you're, I don't care if you're 25, 35, or 65 or older, and you have these realizations, try your best to not go into a shame spiral about it, because you were always doing your best. There's no way you could have done anything differently because you didn't. If you were supposed to do something differently, you would have. And if we can be in that place of just self-compassion around that, treating ourselves in the same way we would treat our children if they came home from school and they had been bullied, we wouldn't say like, well, you need to go back out there and beat the person's ass. Like, we would say, no, come here, tell me what happened. Like, what's going on here? How can I help? And if we can start with that level of compassion, then we open ourselves up to the liberation of, okay, this is not ideal for me. I did the best I could in the past. It's not my fault that any of this stuff happened. If I had parent stuff or whatever happened, but it is my responsibility, if I want a different experience of life, to take an active role in creating a different experience of life. And so if you can be in that place where you kind of just hold this lightly, don't have it be a tight grip, like, I need to do personal growth, I need to evolve, I need to increase my consciousness. Like, let it be something you do because it's the most interesting, helpful thing that you can do for your own experience of life.
I love that. That's super helpful. Now, I know in your book there's a term that you use called baby assassin. And if I'm not mistaken, that's like basically that voice that we always have, the one that tells us that we suck, that we shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. You know, it's just basically that reoccurring non-helpful thought that kind of keeps us stuck in this prisoner mentality.
Right, right.
So if you could elaborate a little bit more about what the baby assassin is.
Yeah, yeah. So my whole thing is, and I hope this came through in the book, but my whole thing is trying to make the whole personal growth journey not so serious, not so heavy,
Yeah.
right? And so when people say like the inner critic, and
Yeah.
and it just feels again very heavy and serious, and like I need to build up all this courage and have mantras and stroke my rosary beads and do all these things in order to go out in the world. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, by the way, but just making it all so serious. And so for me, I wanted to picture that little voice in my head as like a little baby assassin. It's like a little baby who's like a little ninja outfit, and he's like going hiya hiya, and it's just like, oh my god, he's so cute, and he's kicking you, but it's like throwing a rock at like Godzilla, and it just like bink, and it just does nothing, and it's so cute. You're like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. You suck. You're the worst. You can never be successful. And you're like, oh my god, you're so adorable. That's so cute. So it's just it's a matter of taking this voice that sometimes feels like it's this massive, boot from the universe or boot from God stepping on your face, and instead make it into this kind of like cute little cuddly thing. And so much of the work I do is, as opposed to trying to solve problems, what if we can make the problems no longer problematic? And what I mean by that is, imagine you're walking in like the desert or something, and you are kind of paying attention to where you're walking, and all of a sudden you look down and there's a coiled up rattlesnake right in front of you, and immediately your body goes into fight or flight, and your nervous system is all activated, and all these thoughts start flying through your head. Oh my god, I'm going to get bit, and I'm going to die out here, and nobody's ever going to know about it, and my family's going to find my rotting corpse 3 weeks from now. Like, all this stuff goes through your head, right? And then when you slow down and you look a little closer, you see that it's a coiled up piece of rope. There's no work to be done at that point. You don't go to your therapist and say, I need to do some work around my relationship to ropes. Like, this is obviously something that I need some deep work around. So it's not to say there aren't things to work on in the content of your thinking, but zooming out from the content of our thoughts, that, trying to always reframe or whatever else, it's just noticing that if we get really clear on what we're actually seeing, there may not be as much work to do as we think there is.
That's interesting. I noticed that in my own journey and listening to motivational speakers and things like that. A concept that constantly comes up is when we're looking at our past and trying to analyze sometimes what happened in our childhood and so on and so forth, that it actually becomes an excuse as to why we are the way that we are. That, just constantly looking back is basically an individual not necessarily looking for an answer, but looking for an excuse, which keeps us, I guess, in that like prisoner perspective, that prisoner identity. Yeah. So I know you mentioned earlier that you had like one of the wake up calls, I guess, in Orlando when you used to live here in Florida. What do you think really propelled you to, I guess, be not firmer with yourself, but really make the decision to not be a prisoner anymore and to really stand in your self leadership, like you talk about in your book?
Yeah, well, that's the beautiful thing about it. I mean, I really love that question because there will be a lot of times I'll do like a keynote or something and talk about all this self-leadership and prisoner stuff. And then I'll come off stage and somebody will say, I get it. Makes total sense. I'm totally ready to do this. How do I do that 100% of the time? And I always tell them, when you find out, let me know, because
Yeah.
I have no clue, right? It is a 100% moment by moment experience. And so people who think I don't have prisoner moments anymore are like, higher than rappers right now. Like they're just like, there's I have tons of prisoner moments. The difference is that I know that the prisoner moments are a choice, right? I know that I'm creating that because I'm not willing to, in that moment, zoom out and see what's really going on. I'm so stuck in this identity of whatever happened in my past or whatever's even happening now. Like I can get stuck in the identity of Jason, the overwhelmed entrepreneur who's upset that his project's not unfolding fast enough. That's another identity. And that has nothing to do with the past. That's just me in the now. And if I get sucked into that role too deeply, then of course I act accordingly. All of my thoughts, all of my attitudes, all of my actions are a response to that projection. And so if I'm cast in a movie to play a bank robber, right? I don't gingerly open the door to the bank and nicely ask everybody to give me their money and their wallets and their jewelry. I kick in the door, I wave the gun in people's faces, they give me my stuff and I run out, right? That's the role that I'm meant to play. But then when they yell cut, if I go home to my family and I think I'm still the bank robber, that's going to cause issues when I get home. If I kick in the door and I wave a gun in my wife and my kid's face, that's going to be a problem. So it's a matter of being able to slow down and saying, okay, I'm playing that role right now. That's okay. I'm playing the bank robber role. This is the same thing with the prisoner. Cool. I'm playing the role of Jason, the overwhelmed entrepreneur. There's no shame in that. But I'm curious for myself. And this is always a curiosity thing. It's always an inquiry thing. I'm curious for myself in this moment right here, right now. How does it feel without an attachment to that role? Right? Let's say I was actually an actor and they yelled cut and I took off the costume. I went to hair and makeup. They got all the crap off me and I was driving home. How does it feel driving away from the set? How do I feel differently? And in my head, I may go, oh, I remember how tense it was being on the set, but I'm not on the set anymore. I'm safe now. I'm okay. And when I have that, when I can really notice how it feels in this moment without an attachment to that role, my nervous system calms down. And it doesn't mean that the role of Jason, the entrepreneur who has all these things to do, is fake. It's not that it doesn't exist, right? That role still has things that need to be done. But the question to ask yourself is, who is more appropriately equipped to help the role of Jason, the overwhelmed entrepreneur? The one who thinks that's who he is and is in the fire, or the one that has some distance from it and says, okay, that's not who I am. It's a role I'm playing, but I'm happy to help you, Jason, in the role you're playing to see how you can fix your problems. And so it's such a difficult, challenging thing when we first start, because we think that we are our thoughts, we think that we are our emotions, we think that we are our bodies and our stories and our bias and our traumas. We think we are all those things, but we're not. At a really deep spiritual level, if you look at like non-duality for existence, the only thing that has been constant since we were born is our ability to be aware of our experience, right? My body has changed, my thoughts have come and go. And it's not like when I have an emotion like sadness and then the emotion goes away, that like my pinky finger goes away with it. Like I'm still whole and complete no matter what these things do. So being able to realize like I can't be any of those things because those things are constantly changing and I'm still here. The only thing that's constant is the version of me that can be aware of all of it. And I can approach those things from a much lighter perspective.
I love that. I know that you've referenced Deadpool as being one of like the best Marvel characters in terms of awareness, kind of what you were just referring to. Why do you like Deadpool so much?
Well, in terms of everything, Deadpool is the best.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first of all, I'm a huge Ryan Reynolds fan. When we were in Mind Valley, Dubai, I did an exercise with the crowd, and one of the questions I had them ask each other to kind of connect more is, who would play you in the movie of your life and why? And my answer is Ryan Reynolds. And when they said why, and I said, I mean, come on, look at me, and then everybody started laughing, and that hurt my ego. So, but I just love him. He's hilarious, and I love his relationship with his wife. And he just seems like a really incredible human. But as the character Deadpool, Deadpool to me is the most spiritually evolved of all the Marvel characters because he's the only Marvel character that knows he's in a comic book, right? He knows it's not real. If you watch the Deadpool movies, he breaks the fourth wall and talks to us, the audience, right? He knows it's all BS. But the beautiful thing about that is that he doesn't say, oh, none of this is real. I guess I'll just go sit on my couch and wait to die, right? He says, okay, it's not real, but it is a game that I'm playing. It is a reality that's been created around me. Let's play it to the best level I can. Let me be at a level of excellence. Let me be really convicted about my beliefs. Now, of course, he does it with gratuitous violence, but for the rest of us, just being convicted about your beliefs and saying, even though this is all a thought created reality, I still do have to live in the world of form, right? And I love people who say, they want to be like the Buddhist monks, and Buddhist monks are amazing, and I love Buddhism, but Buddhist monks don't have the same stimulus coming at them on a daily basis that we do in the world of form, right? So the practices are amazing, but to think that I can be in this blissed out state all the time, I think is unrealistic. I still have to work in the 3D world. So if I can be in this in between, if I can hold this paradox of none of this really matters, right? In the grand scheme, none of it matters. But since I'm here, let's play the game to the best of my ability. That's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah, I like that. You made a comment earlier about like nothing being wrong with us as individuals, and I think that's huge. I think in your chapter, life is not a correctional facility. You kind of tap into that there's nothing wrong with you, that there's nothing to change, there's nothing to sort of fix. How did you feel when you came to that realization? Because I know for a lot of us it's a very hard concept to grasp. It's like we have to hold on to that victim mentality. There has to be something wrong with me, because if there's not, then who am I?
Right. And well, it's funny you say that though, because like you were saying before, how sometimes the traumas can be a scapegoat, right? They can kind of be a
Yeah.
thing to wear as a badge of honor to kind of absolve yourself of responsibility to actually go do something about it. That can be the case here too. But there's also just this, I think the messages we get, whether it's social media or traditional media or whatever it is, we are raised, at least in the States, and I think this is true for most developed countries, that we are raised to compete. We're raised to compare. And there's a lot of arrogance and a lot of individualism, especially in the US. It's a very individualistic culture. And when you live in an individualistic culture, then you have to be better than somebody else, because if not, you're worse than somebody else, and that's not good. And so we are constantly looking for things that are wrong with us, because if we can just fix those things, then we'll be enough, right? And what I really realize, and this is for myself as well, is that I still get into these places, believe me, where I'm comparing myself, and I'll be in rooms with people sometimes that I personally view as being like at this very high level, and I say, why am I here? What am I doing here? This doesn't make it. Was there a different there's another Jason Goldberg who's actually a producer in Hollywood. They must have thought it was him that was coming to the thing and not me. And I get into this whole thing, and then I realized something, and I was talking to a client about this recently. He's an entrepreneur, very successful in his own right. Of course, none of us think that we're successful. We all think we're supposed to get to the next level, but objectively, he's successful in all of his businesses that he's run. And he went to some kind of event and he met this billionaire guy. And my client is nowhere near a billionaire. And this billionaire guy took a liking to him and said, hey, we should like grab coffee sometime. And my client was like, yeah, that'd be great. And then they exchange information. They go their separate ways. He comes to the call with me and he goes, why the hell does this billionaire want to meet with me? Like, I'm not anywhere near his level. I'm not making anywhere near the amount of money he has. Why in God's name would he want to spend time with me? And I said to him, I'm curious if you can see something here. He probably has access to tons of other billionaires. He can probably talk billionaire business and yachts and whatever he wants to talk about with tons of people. But he may not have access to people like you, who are so heart-centered and so present and so mission-based and so values-based. Like, there's something about the way you show up that had him say, I want to spend more time with this person. I want to be in this person's energy. And this is where he had the realization, and I had the realization for myself as well, that we are so quick to undervalue what we have and overvalue what we don't, right? And so I undervalue my heart. I undervalue my presence. I undervalue my ability to be connected and to have empathy and to have compassion. And I overvalue the fact that I don't have $1 billion in the bank. I overvalue that I don't have a Bentley. I overvalue that I don't have a home in Ibiza, because that's how you're supposed to say it if you're rich. So we can start switching that around, and just as a thought experiment, say, what would happen if I started overvaluing what I have and undervaluing what I don't? And start looking at it from that perspective. And when I look at it that way, and when he looked at it that way, it became much more apparent that our true value in this world is not something that can be attained. It's something that just comes through us as the essence of who we are.
That's great. I know that you've spoken about your, I guess it's your business plan or the vision for your business, and the fact that your business and your life plan are the same thing.
Yep.
And that there's actually no difference. And the fact that it's so simple, you keep it, I think, if I'm not mistaken, to like one sentence, which I love.
Yep.
Because being a new entrepreneur myself, I, feel like, I don't know, there's so much complications in terms of like, what's the business mission and vision? And you have to have everything figured out right out of the gate.
Yep.
And kind of like you said, we don't realize that it could be just as simple as, what is it that I bring to the table?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. And everybody can do this. And it's exactly what you said. It's my one-line life/business plan. And I would invite everybody listening to this to do a version of this for yourself. Just, steal this exact thing that I'm about to tell you. Is, for me, it's my one-line life plan/business plan is to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than when I found them. Right. And so that could happen with the TSA agent at the airport. That could happen with the flight attendants. I always bring a bag of candy for the flight attendants every time I go on a flight, right? Because they have such thankless jobs, and people always think they're waiters and waitresses, and they're actually like highly trained, safety experts in aviation. And so like little things like that. Or it could be in a podcast interview. It could be in a talk on stage, in a coaching session. It doesn't matter the container. It just matters what it is. What's the impression I want to leave behind? And I don't mean impression like trying to manage your impression and make you think something of me, but like with wet cement, when you press your hand into it, when you leave, that's there. Everybody knows it's been there. Everybody can see it for life. So what is it for you? No matter what business you're in, what do you want to activate within the people that you serve? And I don't care what kind of business you're in. You could say, I have a convenience store. I have a spa. I have a wellness product. I have a consulting firm. There is something that you want your clients to experience. And if you can put that feeling and that experience at the forefront of what your vision is for your company and your mission is for your company, it makes decision-making so much easier. It makes showing up so much easier. Everything gets simplified when you do that. So I would say to anybody listening to this, and you can play with it, you can either say, I want to leave everybody with 5% more of something or 5% less of something. So I kind of have both. I don't publish the second one because it's not as inspiring, but at a true level, it's that I want to leave everybody I meet with 5% less suffering than when I found them. Yeah. Because that's been my experience for the first 30 years, with so much suffering. And I don't want other people to experience undue suffering. Everybody's going to experience some suffering. I think it's useful to an extent, but I want to leave them with 5% less suffering. So whatever that is for you, really sit down and give some thought to this: 5% more or 5% less.
Nice. I know that a lot of us that are like aspiring to be coaches, and really get into like the personal development space, you've said that if you're a coach, you're actually in the reminder business. And it's something that it's one of those things that when I heard it, it felt like something I knew internally, but hadn't. It
was a reminder. It was a reminder for
you. Right.
It
was like, and then you said it, and I was like, oh shit, he's right. I was like, that makes sense.
It's so good. Yeah,
so
the full thing is I say that we're in the PR business, so it's permission and reminders. Right. Yeah. That's the two things, right? It's like we were talking about earlier, that, not negotiating with your soul. I don't need to tell you what you need to do. You know what you need to do. We just need to clear the blockers out of the way so that you do it. So yeah, the permission and reminders to me, and it's what I need too. It's the same thing. Yeah.
It's amazing that, I have a daughter who actually just turned 19.
It's amazing.
And, she's trying to develop herself in the world, and she's trying to find her path, right? Find her way. And so her leaving high school in the next few months. I know that she feels all of these like societal pressures about what you should be doing, who you should be in the world. And she's asked me on several occasions, she's like, "Mom, like how do you do it as an adult?" She's like, "You've got to be Houdini to kind of, juggle everything and make things appear and, do what you have to do as an adult." And I told her I still struggle with those very same questions being the age that I am. It's still very much, how can I be authentic and walk in the world and show up as my true self without all this like baggage of people and what they want from me and what they expect out of me.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice as to that sort of problem, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, everybody has a right to their life, right? You have a right to do what you want to do. Your daughter has a right to what she wants to do. The people in your life that want things from you, they have a right to want things from you. And you also have a right to not give them what they want. And they have a right to be disappointed that you didn't give them what they want. And the reason I say all this is because, especially if you are a recovering people pleaser, like I absolutely am. I'm not just a member. I'm also the president. And the biggest thing with people pleasers, at least in my experience and with a lot of the people I've worked with, is that we think it's our job to manage other people's experience.
Right.
If it wasn't my job to manage your experience, then you could be disappointed and I could be okay with you being disappointed. And you could even tell me that really disappointed me that you did that. And I could hear that. And I could say, I really hear that you're disappointed and I'm really sorry that you're disappointed. And I'll try my best in the future to communicate this in a different way or whatever it is without having to give in and acquiesce and give up your internal life force to please other people. So that's been some of my biggest work from being raised by my mom and really having to manage her emotions and manage her experience of anxiety and all the stuff she was going through. It then teaches you that your experience is secondary to everybody else's. And so that can be a heavy lift to start reprogramming that to say, not only is my experience valid and not only is my experience okay to be my priority, but everybody else, they're allowed to have their experience too. And it's like, oh no, but I really don't want to let people down. Yeah, I get that, but they're allowed to be let down.
Yeah. I know it causes a lot of fear in people because, again, it goes back to what it means about them and it creates anxiety. And I think anxiety, especially anxiety, I think it's such a common, I guess, emotion that people don't necessarily understand.
Mm-hmm.
I know that in terms of the thoughts that we have and the emotions, that we're actually making a choice to attach in some way to those thoughts and emotions.
Yep.
And I know you've spoken about like this like train of thought or train of thinking that
Yeah.
people tend to jump on.
Yeah, yeah, and I did write that in the book, and now I feel like I've gone even deeper with that kind of understanding to make it even more, I guess, more practical and easier to really tap into. Is that the challenge we have here, going back to the whole negotiating with your soul thing we talked about earlier, is that we are constantly negotiating with our experience, right? And what I mean by that is we get stressed or we get anxious or we get sad or we get whatever, and our first, like right out of the gate, completely automatic response is, well, this has to go. This can't be here. This has to go, right? So now I've said no to something. And if I say no to something, it's going to stick around longer. It's like if you walk up to somebody on the street, and you couldn't do this during COVID, but now it's a little safer. If you walk up to somebody on the street and you just tell them, hey, can I touch your hand? And they go, you're a creep, but sure. And you say, can you just put your hand up like this? And they put their hand up, and then you put your hand up and you press against their hand without saying anything, they're going to press back. You don't have to tell them anything. If you press against them, they're going to press back.
Yeah.
So if you press against this feeling, instead of trying to be in harmony with it, you try to fight against it, it's going to stay there longer. And so the goal of what we want to do here, and this is, again, all of these are practices that I'm always using on myself as well. And this was a visual that I got from one of my mentors, was if you think about the room that you're in right now, like the room that you're actually in, Brandy, right now, do you think the room that you're in has any feelings, for better or worse, about the furniture that you bring into that room?
No.
No. I've never had a room tell me that couch is hideous. Get it out of here now, or I'm tearing this place down, right? The room does not negotiate with the furniture that you bring in. The room doesn't negotiate with the people that come into the room. It's simply the space for all things to exist. It has no preference whatsoever. And we can do the same thing with our minds. Our minds can be like that room. and we can say everything is welcome here. I don't have a problem with any of it being here. And that lack of resistance to the thing, it's been said that the acceptance of a negative experience is a positive experience, right? If I can just stop being in resistance to this experience, it's much easier to just be with the experience. And then before I know it, I look around and I go, oh, wait, where did it go? It was here, but now it's not here anymore. And people say this all the time too. They say, oh, I'm anxious all the time. And I ask them, did you have even 5 minutes of sleep last night where you weren't anxious? And I go, well, yeah, I mean, I slept a few hours. I wasn't anxious. And I said, cool. Where did the anxiety go? Because if you're anxious and nothing's changed in the world, then you should be anxious in your sleep as well. And they say, oh, well, no, but I'm asleep. So I'm just not thinking about it. I said, okay, well, maybe. But here's the thing. What actually happens, in my mind, at least, the way I view this, is that when you sleep, your mind relaxes around everything that's going on in the external world. And that's why you don't feel the anxiety. So if cause and effect, I relax my mind and I no longer feel anxious, applies when I'm sleeping, maybe it applies when I'm awake. And if I can relax my mind when I'm awake, maybe I don't feel as much of the anxiety. And so that's the practice of noticing when I have this tight grip on life, this tight grip on reality, and asking myself, what would it feel like right here, right now? And that's always what I say, right here, right now. Not what would it feel like if I do this for the next 6 years, just like right here, right now. How does it feel if I just loosen my grip a little bit on this situation? Not telling you to let it go, not telling you to reframe it, not telling you to find the silver lining. If I just loosen my grip on this thing, how do I feel? And I'm telling you, these little glimmers, it doesn't have to be this massive, like mind-blowing thing. These little slivers of peace where you get a little bit of space between who you actually are and the thoughts that you're having in that moment. That's where the joy and the peace comes back. So it doesn't have to be this really heavy thing. It can be a very small recognition that helps you to recognize that this stuff doesn't have to be so serious.
Yeah, that's very true. I like what you said earlier about the room, because I actually, whenever I have like a new insight or realization or something like that, that's the way I kind of visualize my brain, like furniture moving. Like I've had the couch in a certain area, the table, the lamp, or whatever. So when I have some new insight, it's kind of like something's filed away in a different drawer, or maybe I've moved furniture or something like that. So, so yeah, that really spoke to me. I agree.
That's cool. I think that's so cool. I think having any kind of like visuals that help you with that, if you're a visual person, some
Yeah,
people are not super visual people, that's okay. But if you're a visual person, I think that's such a great thing to anchor into those kind of like physical spaces in the mind.
yeah. What do you think about so I know a lot of people talk about like the concept of a higher self, or
Mhm.
like this person that you envision yourself to be in 10 years, 5 years. They've got, like the perfect business, fit body, the house they want, spouse they want, children behave wonderfully. It's like this ideal life. I know that for myself, whenever I think of like the next version of myself, or like the highest self of Brandy, it's almost like a parent. Like, when you have like a 2-year-old that's just learning how to walk, and the parent's like, all right, come on, you can do it. Just a few more steps. That's what I kind of that's how I feel, I guess, Brandy 5 years from now is probably looking back at me like, all right, just, wake up today and do just what you can for today. Like what you say,
Yeah.
just for
Just for
today.
today. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I see, and here's the thing is that like the way you just said that to me, that's the healthy version of this, because there's a version that says, you know, you better become your best self. Like this is not okay. And you better, and 5 years from now, you better be in this space and you better be doing this in your life. And it's like, it's this shame-based motivation, right?
Yeah.
I have a chapter in Prison Break called Deep Shame Thrombosis, right? It's like how we motivate ourselves by shame. But what you did was you made it a game, right? You're like, oh, my 5-year-old self, 5 year from now self is looking back, or maybe even your 5-year-old self, but your 5 year from now self is looking back and like, you got this, you can do it. That's fun.
Yeah.
That's a game. I love that. For me, what I do, and I'm notorious, and I'm not saying this is the right way to do it. I'm notorious for not really setting a lot of goals, or like having a lot of like really clear like visions of everything that I want to do. And I instead stick with like a North Star, right? So I have like this North Star. So it's like, I know I want to build, a beautiful house that is going to be, amazing for me and my friends and my family. I don't know where it's going to be. I don't know the style of the house, but I just know I'm going to build the house. Like that is my North Star. That house is going to exist. And that way I don't have as much rigidity in the process of what it is I'm trying to get. I hold the vision more lightly. So for me, the way that I've kind of done this, I guess, best self exercise, if you want to say that, is, and this is something I did in the beginning when I first started my coaching business. I had a few other startups before I got into coaching, but coaching was the hardest one because it was the first time where I felt like I was selling myself, right? My other companies that I had, there was like a service or there was something else that wasn't me. So there was a little bit of separation. Now it's all personal. It's all ego. It's like when they say no to me, it's my soul is, oh, I suck. I'm horrible. And so I was trying to do the work and trying to build the business. And I just was feeling really dejected. I was feeling really disheartened. Things weren't happening the way that I thought they should. And it made me not want to do the work anymore. There was one point I'm like sitting on the couch scrolling on Career Builder and I'm like, screw this. I'm going to go back and get a job. Like I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And then I came up with this idea. And the idea is that I was going to pretend that I had just been cast on a reality TV show. And this reality TV show was scouring the world, trying to find somebody who was on a mission to make a big impact in the world. And they said, listen, we're going to sign you up for this show, but you need to know there's going to be a camera crew at your house every morning at 6:30, and they're going to follow you every day. So if you're not sincere about doing this, let us know now. And I had to think about that. And I go, yeah, I'm in. And so I started living as if there was a camera crew following me around. And now here's the thing. When I tell people that story, a lot of people will initially think, oh, okay, well then that means you have to be like on all the time and like always crushing it and always doing the work. And if I was really on a reality show that was really showing my process of making an impact in the world, they would need to see that I have off days. They would need to see that I have days that I want to give up. And they would need to see how I navigate those experiences so that I can get back to being on mission to make this big impact in the world. And so when I used that, I went super far. I actually literally wrote an entire letter, right? I have it as a Google Doc, and then I sent it to a friend and had them email it to me. And this letter was from the production company saying, like, we've chosen you for the show, but you better know before you agree to this, blah, 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 respond back and let us know if you're in. And I literally replied back to my friend and said, I'm in. And so it felt like an actual transaction between me and a production company. And that really changed my mindset. So the reason I say that that's kind of my best self exercise is because to me, my best self is created day by day, moment by moment, right? JFT, just for today.
Yeah.
So if I wake up tomorrow or I wake up today and I know that the camera crew is going to be there, I say, what version of me is going to be required today, just for today, to make that impact? How would people from the outside know that I was doing what I needed to do and being who I needed to be to make this mission come to reality? And that's kind of my daily practice.
Very cool. I like the fact that you emailed it to a friend. It like solidifies it more as an experience for yourself.
Totally.
That's awesome.
It was fun.
I know that when it comes to, like just for today and trying to really get around, I guess, the idea that we are in fact human, we can't do everything, like we do have limitations. And I mean, and those things are okay. I know that when entrepreneurs are trying to grow their business, they look at every transaction, kind of like what you said, every interaction as a make or break situation for them. And I know you have a chapter in your book that's that refers to it being kind of like a line in a play, that it's not your only line in a play. Right.
And that's exactly it. It's there's this real challenge again that I've seen in my own life plenty of times, and especially if I'm starting something new or doing something I've never done before, something that feels edgy or scary or unfamiliar. And and what will happen is there will be some delay, some procrastination, some overwhelm, some whatever it is. And I was doing a talk in Estonia last July, and it was to a group of 850 like coaches, entrepreneurs, and it was about how to lose the weight, WAIT, right? How to get out of this position of waiting and like actually get into action. And what I was sharing with them is that the reason that we don't take consistent action a lot of times is not a strategic issue; it's a significance issue, right? We put too much significance on the thing, and then it becomes a make or break, a life or death kind of thing. And so I brought up on the screen during this presentation the Nike slogan, right? Just do it. Everybody knows the Nike slogan. And I ask everybody in the audience in unison, what's the word you focus on when you see the slogan? And 850 people in unison said, do. And I said, yeah, of course, do. The problem is that if I was going to do it, I would have done it already, right? So that's the challenge. So I said, what if we shifted over, instead of the word do, we shifted to the word just? Because I just brushed my teeth this morning. I just took my vitamins. I just made a smoothie. I just told my girlfriend I love her. Like, I didn't have to have an ethic. I didn't have to, pump myself up. I didn't have to make a big deal out of it. It was just something I did. So what if I also just propose my services to that client, or just create that piece of content online, or just have that difficult conversation with an employee? If I can take away the significance from all of this and not make it such a big deal, then it's much easier to get into action.
Yeah. And I think it also helps you to kind of realize what thoughts necessarily work for you and which ones don't. Like there are helpful thoughts versus non-helpful thoughts. I know that the mind is going to do what the mind does. It's going to think and go crazy, and it's going to do all sorts of things. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the amygdala that's like our fear center.
Yep.
So whenever I'm feeling anxious, I call her Amy. I envision Amy running around with like a torch or something around a room, just like, lighting everything on fucking fire. She's like, watch out, be careful. So in those moments, I try to talk to Amy and I'm like, all right, girl, what's going on? I appreciate that you're trying to keep me safe. And I understand that you see all of these dangers, but you got to kind of take a back seat. I can't let you drive the car.
Yeah.
You have to tone it down a little bit.
You're being a little extra. Your team too much right now. Just like we need to just like slow it down just a little bit. No, I love that, and I love what you said too, because there's this. Are you a meditator at all? Do you meditate much or not so much?
A little bit, not so much. A few times a week, but not every day.
Beautiful, fine. So I'm going to judge you now. No, I'm kidding. But no, the reason I say that is because people who meditate, they often think, or people who try to get into meditation and then say, screw this, it sucks, is because they think they have to quiet the mind. Right? That's the point of meditation, to quiet the mind. And then when they're trying to sit there for 5 minutes with their eyes closed and their mind's going crazy, they go, well, this sucks. I'm not good at meditation. I'm not doing this anymore. And the mind runs. That's what it's supposed to do. Like you said, the mind thinks. That's what, if the mind doesn't think, then we're brain dead. That's a bad thing if the mind's not thinking. So for me, I have the kind of mantra of my mind's job is to run. My only job is not to run after it. Right.
Love that.
And so I visualize that kind of like you do with Amy, where I almost visualize kind of like a sumo ring, like a circle. And we're both in the middle of the sumo ring. And then my mind just takes off running out of the sumo ring. And I go to run after them. But like I see the edge of the sumo ring and I'm like, oh, nope, I stay inside this. And I watch it and I see my mind getting smaller and smaller as it's running off in the distance. And we're done. Right. So I think it is a really powerful practice to understand that you don't have to get your mind to quiet down. And if you're somebody who has wanted to meditate or has seen the benefits that people say about meditation, unless they're all just lying, which is possible, but if you've seen the benefits of meditation that other people have touted, one thing I'll give you that may be helpful, because I needed it for me, was this distinction of meditation as nap time versus meditation as recess. Like recess in school when you play on the playground and stuff. And so a lot of people think that the goal is meditation as nap time. And when I think about this, and I've never been a teacher because I don't have the temperament, they are saints, and they should be getting paid when NBA players are getting paid. But if you remember being in nap time as a kid, or you have kids and you've seen what nap time looks like, the teacher has to manage every element of that room. Right? The kids have to be laid out in a particular way. The blankets have to be there. You can't put Jimmy next to Tommy because he's going to elbow him in the face because he's a little schmuck. And then you have to have the temperature perfect, the lighting perfect. And then when you wake them up, you got to do it softly so they're not cranky. And you got to have the snack ready for them. And it's like, oh my God, there's so much to manage for nap time. But if you look at recess, the teacher takes the kids out in the yard. There's a fence. Teacher can sit there and read a book, look up every once in a while. Yep, Jimmy's still alive. Tommy's still alive. We're good. And they run around and they play and they tire themselves out, and you come back inside. And so allowing yourself to have your meditation be a recess where your mind just runs like crazy and you just kind of sit back and watch the show, that's just as valuable as having a totally quiet mind in meditation.
Yeah. I know that you've said that the presence of a thought doesn't mean that there's the presence of a threat. And that was another like reminder. I was like, holy shit, he's right.
Yeah, it's so true. There's a misconception that we have because, again, our minds get hijacked, and it depends on, how you were raised. And if you had a lot of chaos in your household, then you're maybe super hyper vigilant to look out for chaos coming. And so you need those early warnings, right, to protect you. But the challenge is that there's typically nothing to be protected from. And so this is one of those things where, they always say, don't go grocery shopping when you're starving, right?
Right.
Do you know why that is? Why do they say that?
Because then you'll buy the whole thing. You'll
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
it
You just, there's
more than
no
what you need.
intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You do like me. You put the strong arm out and you just the candy aisle just into the basket, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when we try to deal with these thoughts that feel like threats when we're in this kind of activated system. And so what I always tell my clients and what I always tell myself is just to remember when you are in a low place or when you are in a stress place or when you are in any place that is disconnected from joy or peace, your thoughts cannot be trusted.
Yeah.
They just can't. They can't be trusted. And so in the same way, if you have like, a friend who's drunk off their ass and trying to tell you, what you should be doing with your life, and you're like, yeah, no, I think bungee jumping in, with no real cable or just, hoping for the best, and it's water anyways. And so like, that's going to break your fall. It's a great idea, bro. We should totally do that. Never. And so just remembering that just because a thought is in your head doesn't mean you have to believe it. Just because a thought's in your head doesn't mean you have to engage with it. But the fact that a thought is in your head just means that there's a thought in your head. That's literally the end of it.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's definitely something that I know a lot of people struggle with. Even the realization that that is a fact, that I don't have to jump on every single thought and follow it every time that I have it. I know that a lot of it comes down to habit and making the like daily choice, or not even daily, it's like moment to moment,
It is
honestly. Moment to moment to not, yeah, to not follow that wild animal, I suppose,
right.
that you can't control. Fact
It's
of the
true.
matter.
It's true. Just and that's the thing. It's what and I tell people this all the time. When you're kind of starting off on this journey, or even if you're not just starting off, even if you've been doing it for years, just the recognition piece on its own is huge, right? If you recognize, for example, oh, I'm having a prisoner moment right now, and then you go, and I'm going to keep it that way, and you decide to be a prisoner for the next hour, fine. The fact that you had that little moment where you said, I'm having a prisoner moment, and this is a choice right now, and I'm choosing to continue being a prisoner, that's actually transformational, right? Just because you didn't just, oh, well, I'm going to shift into self-leadership, like, sure, that's great too. But if you don't, it's still transformational to notice the role that you're playing in creating those prisoner experiences.
Yeah, very true. Um, so one last thing, I guess, before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, and I know you've probably been asked this a million times, what do you think has been the single most, well, not single most, but the most important concept that's helped you throughout your journey in terms of personal development?
There's a lot, and and I actually love this question because I do get this question, and what I try not to do is have something ready for that, right? So when I hear
Yeah.
that question, I always, in that present moment, I think, what is it in this moment for me? And
Yeah.
so when you asked the question, the first thing that popped in my head was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was super stressed out in my coaching business. I was, going to make an investment in this big thing for my business. And like, what if it doesn't pay off? And, this person didn't sign up after they promised they were going to sign up. And I was just so stressed out. So I wrote this super long email to my coach, like 3-page long email, really, really long, just total victim prisoner. It's like, but what about this? And and maybe I'm not cut out for this. And the whole thing. I sent it to him and I'm like, all right, cool. He's going to send me, a bunch of practices and words of wisdom and all these things. He writes me back 20 minutes later, 10 words. So much compassion for what you're putting yourself through.
Wow.
I was like, fuck. And it just hit me in that moment, like the bubble burst. That was my Deadpool moment where I
Yeah.
broke the fourth wall and I go, oh, wait, this is literally self-created. Now, it doesn't mean I don't need to make smart decisions about where my money's going. It doesn't mean I shouldn't look at my sales and enrollment process. But when I'm responding to those things through the lens of, it's the beginning of the end,
Yeah.
I don't have access to my true creative abilities. And like Einstein says, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. And so that notion of so much compassion for what you're putting yourself through, or for me to say it to myself, so much compassion for what I'm putting myself through, that starts to increase my consciousness a little bit. And I start realizing like, oh, wait a second, this is 100% self-imposed. Is there any chance that I'm taking this a little too seriously? Even by 5%, am I taking it 5% too? Is there any chance in the world that I'm taking this a little bit too seriously? And if I can answer yes to that and my consciousness starts increasing, then I go back to the drawing board and I say, okay, from an informational standpoint only, what could I improve about my sales and enrollment process? from an informational standpoint only, what could I do to lower my risk profile on this investment that I'm about to make? But it's totally different than the frantic, oh my God, I got to figure this out because everything's falling apart. So I say that to say, for everybody who is listening to this and feels super stressed out at some point, remember my asshole coach who said, so much compassion for what you're putting yourself through.
I love that. Yeah, I've loved this conversation. Thank you
Me
so
too.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Brandy. I
so
appreciate
much.
it.
Where can
Absolutely.
where can people find you?
Venice Beach, typically. No, I'm kidding. So Instagram is where I typically hang out. And on Instagram, I'm the Jason Goldberg because Jason Goldberg was taken, so I got the most pretentious name I possibly could. I've been thinking about changing it to a Jason Goldberg just to make it less pretentious. But yes, the Jason Goldberg, and that's where I post all my stuff, and you can continue the conversation with me there.
Awesome. I love that. Everyone absolutely has to grab Prison Break. It's been definitely a game changer for me. I've referenced it, and like I said, I've highlighted more than half the book, written notes all over it. So definitely recommend. Thank you again for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Brandy. Thanks for the energy you're bringing to all this work. And I know that you're incorporating it into all the work that you're doing, which we need many more people doing that. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. And thanks for inviting me on.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. Till next time.